Georgia quarterback Carson Beck, heading into the summer, is the betting favorite across the board to win the 2024 Heisman Trophy. But as good as Carson Beck was last year for Georgia, is a Georgia quarterback truly a legitimate threat to win a Heisman Trophy? Let's talk about it.
We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Glory UGA Plus, where I bring you a small taste of what we've got going on in the Glory UGA podcast, which you can find wherever you get your podcast. So if you like this video, make sure to check that out for more great Georgia sports content designed for you guys, the most diehard Georgia fans out there on the planet. And as always, this video is brought to you by the great people at Alumni Hall. And while we're at it, go ahead, guys, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, comment, let me know what you think about today's topic. And speaking of today's topic, I want to talk about Carson Beck and the Heisman Trophy. Now, this is an interesting topic because like all of you out there, I'm very well aware of Carson Beck's profile and his stature in the college football landscape entering the 2024 season. I'm very well aware that he's widely regarded as the best returning quarterback in the country. I would be apt to agree with that. He's regarded as a future first-round draft pick. So given that high profile and the name recognition that comes along with that, and also playing for what's almost certainly going to be the number one team in the country to open the preseason on the AP poll, he's obviously going to be considered a Heisman favorite on some level, right? But I am deep into my summer win total researches. I do this every summer. I love it. If you've been listening to this podcast for a long time, you know me. I'm apt to lay a win total bet or two in the preseason. I love it. I do the preseason win total episodes, which are going to start rolling out here next week. I'll give you guys my best bets in the SEC, across the country, all of that. I love doing it because it's something, it gives me football to like dive into during the summer when we have no games to talk about, right? So I love doing that. So recently, I have been deep into that research, looking at all these different sports books. And as I'm doing that research, I'm coming along all the Heisman Trophy odds on these various sports books. And what I'm seeing is across the board, not only is Carson Beck like one of the favorites, he is the betting favorite to win the 2024 Heisman Trophy. And that is across the board right now, guys. I know it's early summer, late May, long way to go. But when is the last time that we have seen a Georgia quarterback in the preseason be listed almost unanimously as the betting favorite to win the Heisman Trophy? Not in my lifetime, guys. Not that I can recall. I know we just had Stetson Bennett 2 years ago be a Heisman finalist, but at no point was Stetson Bennett a betting favorite to win the Heisman Trophy. Like, even when he got announced as a Heisman finalist, like, we were all thrilled with that because we knew he wasn't going to win. And like the last time we had a Georgia player there was Herschel Walker in the 80s, man, the early 80s. So it'd been a long time. So when I see Carson Beck listed as the betting favorite, it opens my eyes a little bit. I'm like, whoa, okay, all right. Well, I love Carson, but betting favorite to win the Heisman Trophy? Really? Carson Beck, as good as I think he is. And guys, let's go ahead and just establish at the outset here. I love Carson Beck. You guys have been listening to this podcast for a long time. You know me. This time last year, all last offseason, I was raving about this guy. How much I loved him, how good I thought he was going to be for us. Now, I'd seen enough from him in spot duty to believe he was going to be able to do the things that we need our quarterbacks to do in our system to help us go fend for another national title. And he did that, guys. He put us in position. None of that was on Carson Beck. The guy was spectacular for us in his first year as a starter. Heck, I was telling you guys, like, as early as October, November last year, I was telling you on this podcast that if Carson Beck came back for a second year as a starter, he had a legitimate shot to be not just a first-round draft pick, but the number one overall draft pick if you took into consideration the quarterback draft class in 2025. I thought he had a real shot. I was telling you guys that back in October, November, man. That's when I was telling you that. So I love this guy. I only say that to establish my bona fides here, to establish myself as someone who has long had a lot of respect for Carson Beck. And I do think that Carson Beck is the best returning quarterback in the country. I would absolutely agree with that, 100%. Right now, I believe Carson Beck should be the betting favorite to be the number one overall draft pick in the 2025 NFL draft. I put my money on him. I know some people have Shedeur Sanders. Give me Carson Beck, all right? That's how highly I think of him. But two things can be true here. Carson Beck, on one hand, can be the best returning quarterback in the country and the best quarterback in the country this year. And on the other hand, be a guy that's not going to win the Heisman Trophy. Now, I know you're like, well, Tyler, like, what are you talking about here? You're talking about both sides of your mouth. That doesn't make any sense. Well, guys, let's talk about the Heisman Trophy and what this award has become. We know what this award has become. It is purely a statistic-driven award. That is what it has become. Once upon a time, it used to be about the best quarterback on the best team. Not anymore, man. Now it's about the quarterback who puts up the best numbers. That's really what it is. Don't believe me? Let's go back to last year. Jayden Daniels was spectacular. Don't get me wrong. The dude was awesome. He deserved to win it based on how people are handing out this award in recent years. I understand that. But was he the best quarterback? Well, ask any NFL draft analyst, ask any college football pundit, they all would have told you that Caleb Williams was the best quarterback. In the NFL draft, he gets drafted number 1 overall. He was like a unanimous, clear number 1 overall draft pick. But he didn't win the Heisman Trophy last year. Why? Because Jayden Daniels put up better numbers. It's not that Jayden Daniels is that far off from Caleb Williams, high draft pick himself in the first round. But Caleb Williams was universally regarded as the best quarterback in the country. But he still didn't win the award because the people that vote for the award vote for the person who puts up the best yards. And more often than not, it's a quarterback. Now, Carson does have that going for him. And this is not coming out of left field. I get the thought process behind Carson being listed as the betting favorite. All right, on one hand, he's a quarterback. 8 of the last 10 Heisman Trophy winners have been quarterbacks. Makes a lot of sense, right? If he's a quarterback, well, that helps. He also happens to be the best, regarded as the best returning quarterback in the country. That also helps. Going into year 2 as a starter, that should also help. So it's not like this is bananas or an outrageous thing. It's not coming out of left field. It makes sense. But again, I go back to this award being a statistic-driven award. And my question would simply be, as good as Carson is he going to put up the type of numbers that you have to put up in order to win the Heisman Trophy? And I can hear you guys right now, me sitting here telling you that I wouldn't bet on Carson Beck to win the Heisman Trophy, because I don't think he's going to win the Heisman Trophy. I know some of you are sitting out there saying, man, Tyler's a hater. Tyler hates Carson Beck. Tyler doesn't believe in Carson Beck. Tyler thinks Carson Beck's overrated. Nah, man, that ain't the case. I believe in Carson Beck. I love Carson Beck. I think Carson Beck's the best quarterback in the country. First round draft pick, should be the number 1 overall draft pick. All of those things. Let's make that very clear. But again, this award is not so much about who's the best. It's about who puts up the best numbers, because the people that vote for it, that's how they vote. They are just incapable of really taking any nuance into the equation here and truly analyzing who is the best. So they just rely on numbers, man. It's easier. It's hard to argue with numbers, right? It's just an easy thing for them to do. So they lean on those numbers, and they rely on it, man. They rely on that. So I don't think that Carson Beck's going to win the Heisman Trophy. But that all comes back to the numbers. And I have the numbers here for you guys, okay? I don't want to read this number for number, word for word, because this is a lot. But I'm going to put this, if you're watching this on video, I'm putting this up here so you guys can see this. If you're listening on the podcast version, I'll read some of this to you, but you can check out the video on YouTube to get the full picture here. So again, these are the 8 guys in the last decade from the quarterback position that have won the Heisman Trophy. Let's start with last year. Jayden Daniels, we know what he did, 3,800 yards passing, a little bit more than 1,100 yards rushing, so almost 5,000 yards total in total offense. 50 total touchdowns, 13.6 yards per attempt. Caleb Williams in 2022, 4,500 yards passing, 10.3 yards per attempt, 42 touchdowns, only 5 picks. Bryce Young in 21, 4,800 yards, 47 touchdowns. Joe Burrow 2019, just off the freaking charts, man. 5,600 yards passing, 12.5 yards per attempt, 60 freaking touchdowns. Insane. 6 interceptions, a 10-to-1 quarterback or touchdown interception ratio. Kyler Murray, 4,300 yards, 42 touchdowns. Baker Mayfield, 2017, 4,600 yards, 43 touchdowns. Lamar Jackson combined for over 5,000 yards total offense, 3,600 passing, 1,600 rushing, 45 combined touchdowns. Marcus Mariota, 4,400 yards in 2014, 42 touchdowns. So across the board, those guys are putting up massive numbers, big-time numbers. And it's not that Carson didn't put up big numbers himself. Carson put up great numbers last year, especially given the context that he was a first-year starter. A little under 4,000 yards passing in 14 games, so 3,941 yards, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He's not crazy far off in the yardage, and it's certainly feasible that he could get his yardage total into the Heisman Trophy conversation, or into that level, in that category. Touchdowns, though, that's where you got a long way to go. He's a ways off there. So if you look at it in total last year, Beck, through 14 games, averaged 281 yards passing per game. Those 8 quarterbacks that have won the Heisman Trophy in the last decade combined to average 321 passing yards a game, 40 yards difference. So that's not insurmountable. Carson could get to that. That needs he would need a roughly 15% increase in his passing yards per game to get there. That's doable. Now, touchdowns, though, that's where it's like, man, he's got to make a huge leap this year. So 24 touchdowns last year. The 8 quarterbacks that have won the Heisman Trophy in the last decade averaged 46.3 touchdowns per guy. 46.3. So I'm not a math guy. You know this, but double check me if you want. That means Carson needs roughly a 90% increase in his touchdown passes year to year from 2023 to 2024. The most touchdowns a Georgia quarterback has put up in the history of the program was Aaron Murray's 36 back in 2012. None of the last 8 Heisman Trophy quarterbacks that have won threw less than 42. So those 8 guys that have won the last decade from the quarterback position, not one of them threw less than 42 touchdowns. Carson threw 24 last year, guys. He needs to bump that up dramatically. I'm not saying it's impossible, but can we say it's likely? I mean, can we? And it's beyond that, guys. Like, okay, if Carson's going to make that jump, if you think he can make the jump from a passing yard standpoint and from a touchdown standpoint that he's going to have to make to be in the conversation to actually win the Heisman Trophy, well, he doesn't do it alone. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. You have to have the talent around you. And look, I love our players. I think we have outstanding skill talent. I think this might be, as a group, one of the better wide receiver cores that we've had in quite some time here in Athens. But as good as those guys are they that level good? Are we talking like first round draft pick type good? Because that's what most of these other quarterbacks that have won Heisman trophies have had. Like, yeah, they're really good, but they also have elite dynamic skill talent around them, and usually more than one. I love Dom Lovett. Is Dom Lovett a first rounder, guys? Like, no, like he's just not, right? Robert Thomas, really good college player, first rounder? Probably not. I mean, Dylan Bell, first rounder, I think maybe down the road, but right now you have to say no, right? You got a guy like Colby Young. I think Colby Young could be really, really good for us. First rounder, he's got the physical profile, but he's going to have a massive year, maybe, but still unlikely at this point. So who are those first round guys? Brock Bowers is gone. Ladd McConkey's gone. I love Oscar Delt, first rounder. I don't know, man. I love Benjamin Urosic from Stanford. I did a video on him a couple weeks ago. So you haven't checked that out? Check that out, guys. I went in detail. I think he's going to be really good for us. But first rounder, we might need to see a little bit more from him this year. So I just don't know where those like elite first round NFL draft type talents are. And the other guys have had those. You think about Jane Daniels last year, had 2 of them, right? Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. You got 2 of those guys. Joe Burrow had 2 first round receivers and a first round running back. Let's see, Baker Mayfield had Hollywood Brown to throw to, right? That's a first-round guy. So Bryce Young had Jamison Williams, a first-round guy. John Mechie, a second-round guy. They have elite talent around them. We have really good skill talent. Do we have that type of skill talent that's going to help Carson Beck make that 90% jump in touchdowns? I don't know if we have that. I don't know. Doesn't mean we can't be really good, but I just don't know if we have that. Now, what we do have is the offensive line. That certainly helps. Keeps the quarterback upright, gives him a clean pocket to operate from, to allow him to deliver the football and to make some of those plays, give him an opportunity to make those kind of plays out there on the field. That certainly helps. But when you have an offensive line like that, what does that also mean? It means you're still going to run the football a lot, which that brings me to the next point here. Guys, think about what we do offensively. Yes, we have opened things up more the last couple of years under Kirby Smart. Really, Todd Monken opened things up. Mike Bobo continued that trend. Kirby Smart seems to have realized we need to do that. And look, I have a whole episode planned later this week on the evolution of the Georgia offense under Kirby Smart the past couple of years. So look for that. We're going to dive into that really, really deep. But our offense has become prolific, guys. It's a top 5 caliber offense the last 2 years. That's what it is. It has become prolific. But it's still, with how it's built, we're built from the inside out. We're not built from the outside in. We're not one of these teams that's like elite first round skill talent and like we're okay on the offensive line. We are dominantly offensive line, and then we have really good skill talent, but maybe not elite skill talent, right? Running back could be the exception. Brock Bowers at tight end, we'll call that skill talent, that's fine. But receivers, like we haven't had elite receivers, okay? Ladd McConkey really good, but wasn't a first rounder, but still a really good player. But we're built from the inside out. So when you're built from the inside out, you operate a certain way. Yes, we're throwing the ball with more regularity, and we have embraced more of these modern day spread concepts, and we kind of fall in line with this offensive revolution that we've seen over the past couple of years. We've done all of those things, but at our core, we still want to run the football, be a very balanced offense, right? That's what we want to do. When you have an offensive line like that, we're going to lean those guys. You get a guy like Trevor Etienne, who, if you're talking about skill talent, might be the best skill player on the team outside of Carson Beck. So you're going to have a guy like that. You're going to lean on him, and we'll see what we get from Branson Robinson. But if Branson's back healthy, being the old Branson, you have another elite running back there. So we're going to lean those guys like we traditionally have. We're throwing the ball more. We have become a more prolific offense all around, but we still, at our core, are a team that wants to establish a physical identity. We want to run the ball down your throat and work play action off that. Traditionally, that's kind of what we've done. We've certainly evolved a little bit, but that's largely what we do. Now, also think about this. Stylistically, we don't run tempo. Like, I'm not saying we never do tempo. We'll throw it in here like bits and pieces here and there to keep a defense off balance, but that's not what we do by trade. Like that's the exception. It's not the rule. So what does that mean? That means that we don't run as many plays. If we don't run as many plays, Carson doesn't have as many opportunities to put up the kind of numbers that he would need to win a Heisman Trophy. That's part of my skepticism as well. And then maybe the biggest part of this is the defense that we have. You know who our coach is, guys. Again, I think Kirby's allowed the offense to open up in recent years to great effect, but at heart, he's still a defensive guy. What that means is we're always, under Kirby Smart, we are always going to play complementary football. That's what we do. And think about this, you guys. With our defense as dominant as it has been, wasn't as great last year, but still really, really good relative to the rest of the country. How many times in the last 3 years have we been in shootouts late in the game? Like we've had to win a game with a shootout. The Peach Bowl against Ohio State, right? 42-41. Outside of that, win. When was the last shootout that we had to win late in the fourth quarter? We just aren't in games like that because our defense doesn't allow the game to get to that point by and large. They just really don't. I mean, I guess you can say the 2017 Rose Bowl was one of those games. You can say the Peach Bowl in 2022, sure, but outside that, it just doesn't happen. So what that means is, typically speaking, last 3 years, we're just killing our SEC opponents and we're just murdering everybody. For the most part, maybe a game or two here is an exception every year. So when we get in the fourth quarter, we're throttling down, man. Now, Kirby has done a better job allowing us to keep our foot on the gas offensively later in games in the past couple of years, but we still throttle down relative to the rest of the country because we don't have to score the way that those teams do. Most of those teams, like LSU last year, Jaden Daniels had to score into the very last seconds of the fourth quarter because their defense couldn't stop anybody. Same thing with Caleb Williams back in 2022. Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, those Oklahoma offenses versus with the Oklahoma defenses, they had to score all the time. They could never let up because their defense was always giving up points. Even Joe Burrow in 2019, the LSU defense was really talented, but at least for half the year or so, they were giving up way too many points. So LSU's offense had to make up for that and just win shootouts and score a lot of points. That's what they had to do. Our defense doesn't allow us to get in that situation. It just doesn't happen. So you have, a quarter or half a quarter or so, sometimes a quarter and a half, where we're just kind of throttling down and Carson's not giving the opportunities that you would need to put up those kind of numbers the way that maybe a Jaden Daniels was or a Caleb Williams was back in 2022. He's just not going to have those opportunities. And I think that's another big factor working against him when you're talking about, can Carson Beck actually win the Heisman Trophy? Again, has nothing to do with how good Carson is. I think Carson is incredible. What he does in operating an offense, the way that he can diagnose pre-snap, post-snap, his decision-making, his ability to have an answer for really whatever a defense throws at him, I think it's unmatched in college football right now. I really believe that. I think the world of the guy. But again, this award is not about best quarterback. The question is, can you put up the best numbers of all the quarterbacks out there? And with all the context I just laid out, I just have my doubts as to whether Carson Beck would do it. In fact, I have too many doubts to actually go out there and lay a wager on Carson Beck to win the Heisman Trophy. And I know I'm not supposed to say that. I know that as a guy who runs a Georgia podcast, as a guy who is a self-proclaimed Georgia guy, right? A guy who lives in Athens, makes my home in Athens, Georgia, in the Holy Land. I'm not supposed to sit here and tell you that Carson Beck's not going to win the Heisman Trophy. When he's the betting favorite, I'm supposed to sit here as a homer and tell you, oh yeah, guys, go bet the house. Do it, baby. He's going to win, no doubt. But I got to be honest with you. I got to be real with you. That's why I do this podcast. And being real with you, I have my doubts, man. I seriously have my doubts as to whether he can put up the kind of numbers that he would have to in order to win the Heisman Trophy. Now, here's the one thing I do think he has really going for him. So if you are one of those people I'm going to argue against myself here a little bit. If you are one of those people who is maybe inclined to go put a wager on Carson Beck to win the Heisman Trophy right now, I think he's plus 800 right now. If you are so inclined, I think the one big thing that you have going for you is that it's all relative, right, to the given year. And if you look at the college football landscape coming into the season, you have to ask yourself, if it's not Carson, who is it? Who is that guy? There's no obvious answer. It's almost Carson Beck by default. And like if you go back to like say 2018 versus 2019, Kyler Murray won the Heisman Trophy in 2018. Had a really good year. Deserved to win that year, right? Based on his numbers. If that's how we do things, which is how we do things now. But if you go 1 year into the future, if Kyler Murray put up those numbers in 2019, which, was the year Joe Burrow put up like 5,600 yards and 60 touchdowns, Kyler Murray ain't win the Heisman Trophy. It's all relative. Relative to 2018, Kyler Murray put up Heisman Trophy numbers, but not relative to 2019 with Joe Burrow in the picture. So with this year, like, who is the guy? If you look at the guys behind Carson, the next betting favorites, you got Quinn Ewers from Texas, Dylan Gabriel, Jalen Milroe, Will Howard, Jackson Dart, Garrett Nussmeier. That's the list, guys. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking like, well, not Quinn Ewers. Look, Quinn Ewers had a better year last year. His first year as a starter. I know it's his first year. So you can throw that out if you want to. I can't unsee that. He was abysmal. He was terrible as a first-year starter. Certainly was improved last year. Had a lot of good skill talent around him, but he's losing all of his skill talent this year. They did get a lot of players coming from the transfer portal. Guys like Matthew Gold and Isaiah Bond, who I think are going to be really good players, but none of them have proven to be like true, legit number one wide receivers. Isaiah Bond's probably the closest to that. I think he has the potential to be that, but potential is just that until you go out and do it. And also, even if they are really good, you gotta get in a rhythm with these guys, and they're all new. And I also just don't think Quinn Ewers has it. I don't think he's the Heisman Trophy kind of guy. So I don't think Quinn Ewers. Dylan Gabriel is interesting because here's a guy that's on his third school, UCF, Oklahoma, and now Oregon. And he left Oklahoma. Now, he would tell you, I'm leaving Oklahoma just to go for a better opportunity. But look, we know the Oklahoma fans at times over the past year or two have been very vocal about maybe their displeasure with Gabriel at times. And when you have a guy like Jackson Arnold, a former highly rated 5-star guy, it's kind of waiting his turn. There's some longing for him to get his opportunity. Dylan Gabriel read the writing on the wall and said, I'm going to go elsewhere. I feel more appreciated. Maybe I can make some bank here in the transfer portal as a quarterback. So he goes to Oregon. He's a good quarterback, guys. Is he elite? No, but he's a good quarterback. And in the right kind of offense, he can put up huge numbers. And that right kind of offense is Oregon. So he's a guy to watch. Oregon's offense, quarterbacks put up massive numbers, okay? And I think he'll put up big numbers there. If it's a numbers-driven award, which it is, watch out for him. So I could see Dylan Gabriel. Jalen Milroe, super physically gifted, but this is a guy that was still learning how to play quarterback last year, and now he's got an entirely new offensive system to learn. Now, I know the devil's advocate would be, well, hey, Kalen DeBoer is a quarterback wizard, man. Look what we did with Michael Penix. Well, as I said a couple weeks ago, when I talked about Alabama and Georgia and the point spread, Milroe and Penix, it's not the same situation. Penix had a relationship with Kalen DeBoer, Indiana. That was his OC, Indiana. He knew that offense. That's why he went to Seattle to play for him in Washington. He already knew the offense. It was plug and play. There was no learning curve. There's obviously a learning curve with Jalen Milroe. This is a guy that was struggling to learn the offense last year, and we're going to expect him to just pick this offense up in 1 year to the point where he's going to win a Heisman Trophy. I have serious questions there. And also, who's your best receiver? Like, where are your receivers? Like, who are those elite, obvious guys that you have to work with? I don't know, man. So I don't think Milroe's the guy. Will Howard, I don't even want to talk about Will Howard. I mean, I know that Ryan Day, great offensive mind, sure, really great skill talent, but that was true last year too, right? Marvin Harrison Jr. was on the team, and they were not good enough offensively. Now, they changed quarterbacks, but is Will Howard really going to be that much better? Like, what has Will Howard ever done at this point in his career to make you think he's a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback? Have you actually watched the guy at Kansas State? Because I have, many times. Dude essentially at times lost his job to a true freshman last year who could not complete a forward pass, who was just a great athlete. I don't know, man. Don't buy that one. Jackson Dart, I think, is a talented quarterback. I think he's a tough guy. Their offense, they put up numbers, but traditionally under Lane Kiffin, even with Jackson Dart, when they play the best defenses, the best teams, they don't put up a lot of numbers. Like Georgia last year, Alabama for however many years. Now, that was largely because they were just dominating the trenches. They have gone out and tried to address that, brought in 2 offensive linemen from Washington to try to help with that. But I still need to see Jackson Dart be able to beat you from the pocket to think he's going to win the Heisman Trophy. I haven't seen that. There's a lot of talent around him. I get Jackson Dart, but I don't know, man. I just don't know if I buy that. Garrett Nussmeier, look, I know they're high on him at LSU, and when I've seen Garrett Nussmeier, he's done a really good job, but you're losing those 2 first-round guys a receiver. So you got to figure out who those guys are going to be. You're also always going to be compared to Jaden Daniels, which you're never going to be him. So I respect Garrett Nussmeier. I just don't think he's a Heisman Trophy guy. So that's the argument. I think if you want to put money on Carson Beck to win this thing, I think that's your argument. It's just like, well, if it's not him, who else? Like maybe he wouldn't put up the numbers that, Joe Burrow did or Jaden Daniels did or Caleb Williams did, but he doesn't have to. He only has to put up better numbers than the guys he's going against this year. And it is a pretty, relatively speaking, it's a weaker quarterback crop. And if quarterbacks are the ones that typically tend to win the award, I get it. I don't know if Carson put the numbers. I would think there'd be a guy like maybe Dylan Gabriel who would end up putting bigger numbers there. So I don't know, man. It's an interesting conversation here. But for me, if I go back to it, I still go back to the numbers. That's what I always go back to, guys. I just don't think that Carson is going to have the opportunities within our offense with our general offensive and really team philosophy, the lack of tempo that we operate with. That's just not really a part of our offense on a regular basis. The lack of top end, by top end, I mean first round type skill talent around him. And also the defense that we play. I think that complementary football that we play relative to our defense, those are all things that work against him. So, when you think about this question, will Carson Beck win the Heisman Trophy this year? Again, if you want to bet on him, it's your money. Do what you want. And I get it. But at the end of the day, it's a numbers-driven award. And I will believe a Georgia quarterback, no matter how good Carson Beck is, no matter how much I love the guy, how much I believe in him, I will believe a Georgia quarterback will put up the requisite numbers needed to win a Heisman Trophy when I see it. I've got to see it to believe it. Because right now, guys, in my entire lifetime, I just haven't seen it. Now, just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean it can't happen. I'd never seen a Georgia National Championship either until a couple years ago. Now we've got 2 in the last 3 years. So it's possible. I'm not telling you it's impossible. I'm just telling you that if I got to bet on it, I'm not betting on Carson Beck to win the 2024 Heisman Trophy. But all right, guys, I appreciate you being here. Thank you for checking this episode out. Make sure again to like, subscribe, comment. I know a lot of you probably disagree with me. That's a beautiful thing. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comment. We can keep this conversation going. Also, make sure to check out the Glory UGA podcast wherever you get your podcasts for more great Georgia sports content. But I'm Tyler, and as always, go Dogs!
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dogs on top.